Hi, guys, and welcome to the Quinn podcast. Here we give you a look through the eyes of the most successful athletes, entertainers, entrepreneurs, and influencers on this planet. Be sure to check out all of the content at quinnpodcast.com. Enjoy the episode. I was reading up on the brand. It's pretty cool. Like, it's a pretty cool niche. It's a pretty cool space. Can you sort of take me through what got you into this at first? Because I read you had quite the corporate career before this.
I don't know
Take
about
me through
quite
that.
I don't know about quite the corporate career. I'm 30 now. I've
You
been doing
started in
Arrowhead
it,
for
that's for sure.
6, 7 years, so I didn't have too much career before this. But yeah, I mean, it really came down to, what is any brand if not solving a problem, right?
Right.
And in my personal life, I've always taken sort of the intersection of physical fitness and self-preparedness, self-preservation very
Hmm.
seriously. And long story short, I was recently graduated from college. I was living in Atlanta, Georgia with my wife. We were working normal day jobs, and so we were also trying to stay physically fit. And so as a result, that meant primarily going to the gym at odd hours, before work, after work, when it's dark outside, walking through parking garages or parking lots.
Hmm.
And ultimately what I realized was that I didn't feel comfortable in a lot of these situations without having access to my concealed carry firearm.
Right.
And all of the gym clothes that I was wearing did not allow me to safely and mostly safely, but also comfortably carry the weapons that I wanted, even if not inside the gym itself when working out. On the way to the gym, or from the gym, or after the gym, if we were going to run an errand, it was not uncommon that we'd go to the gym and then we'd go do grocery shopping, or go to Target, or whatever the other
Hmm.
errands might need to be after work. And I just was in a situation where I couldn't carry what I wanted to carry without either changing clothes or putting something in a bag, which I'm not personally a fan of, or just leaving it in the car, which is not a good idea at all, especially in a,
Sure.
a city like Atlanta where vehicle break-ins are not uncommon. And so I just kind of started looking around and being like, okay, what can I buy that'll solve this problem for me? And I tried a handful of different things. I looked at what was available on the market, and nothing specifically addressed my use case. And so that got me thinking, because I also had a buddy from school who he and I had been on very similar trajectories. He was also going to go to kind of consulting route, and he actually dropped out of his job right before it started because he went entrepreneurship, and he started his own business and was seeing a lot of success there. And so that already was kind of getting my brain turning in different ways. And I realized, like, well, okay, if I can't solve this problem for myself as a consumer, maybe I can solve it as a producer. And started just kind of sketching and prototyping, and ultimately got connected with that colleague who connected me to another one of his colleagues, and his family was in kind of the fashion apparel design and manufacturing space. And so I was able to connect with them and get some prototypes made. And one thing led to another. Next thing I knew, it was April of 2020, and we were launching our first line of concealed carry joggers, and it was met with pretty great success. And we realized pretty quickly, hey, we might be onto something here. And at that point, then it was, okay, let's start, building new products. Let's grow this up a little bit. Let's get a little bit of funding, which, we were mostly able to do in-house. And it just was something that we grew off the side of our desks for a few years as a passion project. And then about a year and a half ago, it became obvious that we were, really onto something, and I was able to leave my full-time day job and come do this full time. So that's kind of been the overall story. But it just started with me wanting to carry before and after, and sometimes during going to the gym, not having anything that would let me.
Yeah. Sort of an interesting time, right? April 2020 to launch a launch a
Dude, it's so
business.
it's so funny that you say that, because that's almost exactly what I say to people when they
Right.
when we're talking about it. Yeah, it was a very interesting time, but as it turns out, it was a fairly good time to launch an e-commerce business because everybody was hanging out on their devices.
Hmm.
Everybody was wearing athletic clothes, and everybody was a little bit more concerned about the overall state of the world.
Right.
And so maybe taking their personal safety more seriously than they might have been otherwise. So
Hmm.
while it was a very strange time for society, it ended up working out decently well for us overall as a time
Yeah,
to launch a business like this one.
appears that way. That's for sure. What was sort of the idea back then? Like, okay, 2020, you just wanted to solve this particular problem. What did you sort of see? Like, did you foresee the success you had like 5 years later today?
So I always saw it being something that I felt pretty confident could turn into a real thing, more than
Right.
just a hobby, more than just a side project. Um, obviously data is king, and you got to make sure that
Yeah.
things pan out. And I'm very much like a measure twice, cut once kind of guy. If I had, abandoned everything and thrown caution to the wind and dumped my life savings and immediately left my job and done this full time, we probably could have grown the business faster. But, I've got a wife and a family and stuff that I've got responsibilities. So I took it a little slower than that, just kind of to prove out the point. But I definitely knew, or I strongly suspected early on that we could make something real out of it. And to see that come to pass, not without hiccups. Any business as you grow, you're always going to have new challenges and things that are unexpected and stuff that stops you along the way. But to see it actually come to pass and become a real legitimate brand that, we've got
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of people out there wearing our clothing, and, thousands and thousands of positive reviews and some negative reviews, which we use to refine our product offerings and services and all that kind of stuff. And, just really pay attention as we go in the pursuit of constant innovation. It's been
Hmm.
cool to see that play out. And it's especially cool when I see people in public, and obviously I've got a keen eye for it, but I'll see people in public wearing our clothes and just being like, nice, that's cool.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's pretty dope. That's gotta be dope. So what was sort of the point you were like, okay, I'm ready to do this full time? Like, did you have sort of a benchmark for yourself? Like, if I hit this, we can do that, or how did that come about?
It was sort of related to that. So it was sort of fall of 2023. I had a really steady, lucrative day job at the time, but we unlocked some new financing. We had a new agreement that we unlocked with a supplier that
Hmm.
was going to allow us as an inventory-based business to overcome the biggest hurdle that we'd had, which was, you know, we invest money in making product, we sell that product, we get the money back, we reinvest it in making product. And so you have these fits and starts where it's like you've got a bunch
Right.
of inventory, you're sold out. Got a bunch of inventory, you're sold out. And we were able to overcome that with this new agreement that effectively allowed us to front load a lot of our inventory. And so we finally were at that point where it was like, okay, our constraint is finally going to be market demand, not supply.
Hmm.
And the rest of my team, we were seeing the success. We were right on the heels of a big, 2023 Black Friday, where we kind of first saw what's possible when we have enough inventory. And it just was clear to all of us that we'd waited long enough. It was worth giving this a go. And then, 2024 ended up being our biggest year ever by a long shot. And so I'd say it paid off. It was definitely 2024 was a good year for a lot of e-commerce brands and a lot of tactical
Hmm.
brands. So some false positives involved there, but overall, yeah, I mean, it mostly was just getting the right pieces in place to know, okay, like the constraints are out of the way, it's time to run.
Hmm. For sure. I'm sort of trying to understand. Like, it seems like very calculated, right? A lot of people just, I guess, all right, just jump into business, being like, okay, this is something that I'm passionate about, and especially because you sort of did, right? This is a product you're passionate about. Um, Take me sort of more like numbers wise, like how do you sort of look at like a opportunity like this and being like, okay, this is gonna work.
Sure. So, I mean, at the most basic level, if we're removing the actual product from the
Hmm.
the experience, and we're just saying, hey, I want to make a business, an e-commerce D2C business selling widgets, and
Right.
how am I going to think about that and then determine ultimately if it's going to succeed? Um, you want to look at your overall contribution margin at a per order basis and sort of start there, because if
Hmm.
you can't make your business work with variable cost, it's never going to work. And that's just the most basic question. So the variable cost components are going to be, what are my gross margin? And gross margin is effectively how much is it going to cost out of my sale as a percentage for me to acquire the inventory and get it to the customer. And then beyond that, you're also looking at, okay, how much is it going to cost out of, my 100% of revenue as a percentage to acquire a customer and get them to try my brand and buy my widget. And if those two pieces add up to more than 100%, you don't have a business. Unless you are a loss leader and you do what all these, massive companies do, like Rivian, for example, where you go in and you raise $1 trillion and you're burning cash based on the premise that eventually you will have a sustainable business model because your OpEx will go down and your repeat customer rate will go up and all these kinds of things. But generally speaking, if you're talking about, somebody who just wants to start a business and maybe is sinking, 4, 5, or 6 digits worth of their own money into it, you really don't have a huge runway to figure that stuff out. So you
Hmm.
want to make sure, like, okay, if my average order value is $100 and my gross margin based on how I've set my MSRP is 50%, and then my, cost per acquisition, CPA, is $35, so that would be 35% of 100, then you've got a 15% profit margin that you have left over to play with there. And that 15% profit margin is potentially enough for you to create a business. It's potentially not enough depending on what kinds of fixed costs you have to allocate there. So
Mm-hmm.
that really is the initial part. It's like, okay, what's going to be my cost to actually fulfill an order? What's going to be my cost to get an order? And if those two things add up to less than what you can make for an order, you have the fundamental basics of a business. Now, obviously, there are economies of scale that can change both of those things, and there also are diseconomies of scale that you usually reach with marketing. So as you try to get more and more customers, usually the marketing to get the incremental customer becomes more expensive because you have diminishing returns on marketing. But
Why is that?
That's a
Why is that the last thing you said? Diminishing returns. Why does that happen?
So, okay, if you think about, so I was also an economics major, so this is
Right.
very relevant to what I actually know. So if you think about your overall pool of buyers, right? Um, you're going to have a pool. Let's say that there are 100 people in your market and you're making a
Mm-hmm.
product. And of those 100 people, right out of the gates, 50% of them are not interested in what you are selling. You might be able to get them eventually with new products or new offers or something like that, but just 50% of them are not interested. Of the remaining 50, let's say that 10% are your exact target customer, right? They've had your exact same thought. They've got the means and the material resources, and they're in market for what you're selling. They just don't even know it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say that another 20 of those people are potential customers, right? They are about to be where you want them to be, and they're thinking about your product, but maybe they have more skepticism. And then the remaining 20 are maybe they're up and comers, maybe they sort of like what you have going on, but they're skeptical, or they just bought something else, or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for those first 10, the first time they see your marketing, they may go and buy. They may be like, oh my gosh, this is what I've been waiting for forever. And say you're using, Facebook or Google or whatever platform to reach them. And they go in and they see that and they're like, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. And your cost to acquire them may be like $5 because
Mm-hmm.
they barely need to see any advertising, and then they're like, shut up and take my money.
Right.
Those next 20 people, well, they may require a little bit more convincing. They may require seeing more ads, different ads. So you're then investing in different creative or different, having to show it to them 7 times before they actually go, okay, fine, I'll try it. Or maybe those customers need an incentive. So you have to then, they wait for a sale, or they wait for you to send them a 20% off coupon code, or, whatever that might be. And so then your acquisition cost for those customers is higher because they were less in the market for what you're selling. And then that last, group of 20, even more so. So to get them to buy, you might have to go out and show it to a lot more people. At that point, your algorithm might be having to show your ads not just to those 20 people, but to the other 50 people who I already said were not in market. And they're not going to buy. But the algorithm has run out of people who are in market for you. And so they're going out and showing it to more people. And so you're going to get a lot of false positives or false negatives, where
Mm-hmm.
people are seeing your ads that are not interested in what you have to sell, but you have to show them because the algorithm has run out of people who it says, I know I can show it to this person. So as you get farther and farther and farther out of your core market, and there's only going to be so many people who are in market for whatever you're selling at any given point in time, it's going to be more and more expensive to acquire new customers. Now you can combat that with new product launches and new channels of marketing, and expanding your product line and all kinds of things like that ultimately change how your business goes to market. But diminishing returns on marketing is one of the fundamental principles that every business owner should understand. It's like, just because you can spend $1,000 a day on Facebook ads at your target CPA, you try to increase that to $2,000, you may blow your target CPA out of the water, because there just aren't that many people who are in market to buy what you want to sell them. And that's when you start getting into these other things about upper funnel marketing and having to actually build your pipeline and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. With that in mind, do you sort of look at for a D2C brand, be like, okay, a market needs to be this size to even consider going into it? Or is that not the play?
I mean, yes, that's definitely a consideration. Like if I wanted to create a brand specifically for uh, people who want to carry concealed and are blind. Let me just use a crazy example.
Right.
And I were to be like, okay, how many people actually exist out there in the overlap of carry concealed and are blind?
Hmm.
And how am I going to reach them? How are they going to find out about it? I mean, I guess podcast ads or something like that. And then also the question of like, is this even a good product in the first place? The answer is probably there is not a big enough market out there to sustain any kind of meaningful business in that intersection. And so if you've gotten too narrow to the point of recognizing that, hey, this is really narrow, yeah, you probably need to rein it back in. Um, Generally speaking, there's a lot of depth in, especially in U.S. markets, in more niches than people give them credit for. And
Hmm.
people also sometimes overstate. It's like, oh, my business is only going to be a success if I can grow it to be, you know, $10 million a year, $20 million a year, $50 million a year. Not every business is built to be a 10, 20, $50 million a year business. There are
Hmm.
plenty of businesses that are $800,000 a year, $2 million a year businesses that afford great lifestyles to the business owners, and you're making good money and you're working for yourself, and and that's totally fine. So there is a degree of coming in with the right expectations, but that then takes you back to the questions of profit margin, contribution margin, the things that will ultimately determine, can I, either as a sole proprietor or a small business owner, with a team who I'm paying salaries, is there enough meat on the bone here? So considering your overall market sizing is definitely important, but it becomes more of an exercise that you have to take seriously the more niche you get. So for us, my thought was, okay, I'm going after the US concealed carry market, and specifically people who would want to be comfortable and live an active lifestyle while they carry. Well, the US concealed carry market is something like 70 million people. Of those, like 90% of them are dudes. Of those, let's assume realistically, based on American obesity rates, that at least 40% of them live some kind of an active lifestyle. Okay, so I've got a target pool of 20 to 30 million people. Yeah, that's
Right.
plenty for me to build a business based on what I'm looking at, especially since my business is big on repeat buyers. So if you sell
Hmm.
somebody something that solves their problem and will solve their problem for the rest of their lives, you got to account for that. Because once you acquire a customer, you're not going to acquire them again unless you introduce a different product that does something fundamentally different. For me, it's clothing. It's like, how many people are buying 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 pairs of athletic clothes in a given year? As long as we keep coming out with new products and pushing the boundary there, I can have customers who keep coming back to me, and we're just building that share of closet. So all of that matters when you're thinking about your overall addressable market.
No, for sure. No, it's interesting because especially like the people I've had on the show and just in the podcasting space in general, it's like start your business, passion, this and that. It's a lot of hype and a lot of motivation stuff. But I think more technical like conversations like this, I think it's very relevant for a lot of people like coming up. So that's an interesting one. This is mostly just like you said, your economics major or your Deloitte days. How do you
A
you
little bit of
explain
both.
the?
Yeah, I mean, I would say without a doubt that having a background in economics, which then obviously has some exposure to things like accounting and finance, and just being able to make a spreadsheet that tracks your expenses, and being
Hmm.
able to do that kind of stuff as you're getting started, having an understanding of the way markets work, supply and demand, having some exposure to things like corporate strategy and marketing classes, and just seeing the way some of the big boys have done it, and then doing the consulting thing where I got pretty good at the hard skills, and also had a lot of exposure to successful business leaders where, when they're your clients, you get to sit down across from them, and you're working on their business, but that, all the while you're thinking about, okay, how can any of the lessons that I'm learning here apply to mine? That's all extremely valuable. So there is a core skill set that I would say is required to be a successful small business owner. And if you don't have that skill set, and all you're bringing is an idea and a passion, you're going to need to find someone and pay them to
Hmm.
bring that skill set to bear. You definitely want to make sure that's in place before you jump off the deep end.
For sure. So I'm in law school, right? I have like 30 points of like free space, um, of like this stuff we're talking about, like economics, whatever. What would you like do if you're me, like filling those like um, four courses or whatever from what you remember, like most relevant from what you follow for this specific.
Okay, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Um,
Using it as a coaching call now.
yeah, so I would say like intro to microeconomics is so important. So just for anybody who doesn't know, macroeconomics deals with large scale capital markets, things related. If you're thinking about it, it's like what is the government doing to control inflation? What is going on with um, international trade and the stock market and some, things like that that are at a very, very high level, which matter to be an informed citizen, but matter a lot less for your business.
Hmm.
Microeconomics is okay, how is a business making decisions based on the context of supply and demand for their products that they are selling? That's just so important to have as a fundamental understanding because then you do get into these concepts of okay, what is your addressable market? How do you calculate how much when you should be growing your business versus holding it steady and these concepts that then translate into application. So I'd say intro to microeconomics. I would say every founder is in sales and marketing. Like if you're a founder, you're in sales and marketing, whether you like it or not. You are either selling your idea to people who you want to come work for you, or you are marketing your business to people you want to come buy from you, or all of the above, right?
Hmm.
So doing some kind of an intro to marketing class, I think, is very important, even just to open your eyes to what marketing really is. A lot of people misunderstand what marketing is and what marketing entails, and how important marketing is. That was probably one of my blind spots as I got into business. Was like I was of the opinion, hey, if you build it, they will come. And very quickly, I learned about no, like you've got to build a really robust and very expensive network um, of marketing placements to make sure that people are learning about your brand and figuring it out because it's not going to happen by itself. So, microeconomics, marketing, accounting,
Hmm.
actually understanding what cash flow looks like, how the different financial statements work, what they mean, what money is, what it does, and how it works together. That matters a lot. And you're setting yourself up for failure if you're trying to get into business without having some kind of an accounting understanding. You're more likely to bankrupt yourself if you don't know what's going on. That's just to be honest. And then a fourth course. A fourth course, I mean, I'd say just corporate strategy. I mean, something that actually goes through a lot of case studies that go deep. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change that one. I'm going to say negotiations, and understanding
Okay.
how to actually negotiate, understanding what the different pieces of a negotiation are, how you should look at a situation, how you should work your way toward an integrative agreement. I mean, all of the above is just so important because everything you do as a business owner is a negotiation. And I feel like once people realize that and they feel equipped with the right tools to actually have those conversations, you're going to work out better deals for your business. It's just kind of that simple.
Hmm. Cool. Appreciate that. That's like actually practical, so that's good. I like that. Um, all right, man. I read you have like a 20% return customer rate. I don't know if I got that right, but it was something along those
Yeah, I
lines.
mean it fluctuates a little bit. We're a bit north of that, but we have a strong return customer
Nice.
rate that we definitely pride ourselves in having a loyal following of people who enjoy our stuff enough to keep coming back.
Why is that? You believe from all the brands that don't achieve that?
You just got to have a good product. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't have a good product, people are not going to come back. Um, there are other things that can prevent people from coming back, definitely. But the absolute bare minimum table stakes is you got to have a good product. Beyond that, uh, you got to have a good you got to have a good experience. You got to have a good so there's that period between, especially for a new customer, between I've given you my money and I've gotten what I paid for, and that period
Hmm.
is full of a lot of anxiety for people, especially when they're
Hmm.
trying something that they've just learned from the internet or they don't have a relationship with. And doing what you can to manage that period, make sure that they feel reassured and that you're transparent and communicative about what's going on with their order. You give them good tracking information, so on and so forth. That's really important. And then there's the after sales experience. And that is, hey, I got my stuff and it doesn't fit. I need to return or exchange. Hey, I got my stuff and on my first use, a zipper broke. Hey, I got my stuff and I just don't like the color. Or, hey, it says it was delivered, but I can't find the package. the way you handle those situations really matters as a business. And frankly, this
Mm-hmm.
is a lesson that I've had to learn with time because I came into it. Uh, if you come into it with a scarcity mindset and your mentality is I've got to keep as many dollars that come into the company as I can, then you're going to end up making decisions that are not in the customer's best interest. And if you are making decisions that are not in the customer's best interest, I can basically guarantee you they're not in the business's best interest. Because one upset customer who is willing to go out and tell their friends or post on the internet that they had a bad experience with you could easily cost you 10 future customers. On the
Mm-hmm.
inverse, one really happy customer who had an experience that was trending negative, they get the product and man, it wasn't made right. And that's going to happen sometimes. Even with the best QC, like people are going to get stuff that wasn't made right. And their experience is, hey, I'm so sorry about that. We'll get a new one sent your way right away. Your their reaction to that is going to range somewhere from either neutral to okay, that was my baseline expectation is that I'm going to get what I expected to get, to extremely positive. Wow, look, this company actually is standing behind their stuff and
Mm-hmm.
they are going out of pocket to send me a new pair and I didn't have to do anything. I just had to tell them about it. And in doing so, you can create advocates. You can create people who have really good experiences. And if you've already paid to acquire a customer, you want to keep that customer. And you got to think about, hey, would I rather spend, let's just use an example, say that it cost me $30 to acquire a customer. Would I rather spend another $30 to go out and acquire a different customer to replace this guy? Or spend $30 or $40 or however much on this situation to make that customer happy and, bank on the fact that they're going to come back and buy maybe multiple times in the future. And when you start thinking about it that way, the economics of it make a lot more sense. And if you also just sort of do what the Lord calls us to do and do unto others as you would have done unto you, it's pretty simple. And I mean, we really try to pride ourselves in having integrity and running our business in a way that would make Christ proud, and that means doing right by people. And that was something
Yeah.
that I didn't always exhibit excellent leadership with, especially early on when things were tighter and smaller. But now that we're growing to be a bigger business, trying to do the extra mile by your customer will go a long way.
No, I can imagine because the deplatformed thing, right? It's if most of your revenue is coming from ads, it's quite the thing, like building a community.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting. So we're a gun adjacent business. We don't sell weapons, we don't sell ammunition, we don't sell anything illegal. We sell clothing that just happens to have a use case that is related to guns. And so as a result, we're able to operate on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Google, all of that stuff. And we did have a period back in 2020 where we lost all of our platforms for a period of time, and then we had another smaller issue in 21, maybe 22, I don't know, 21, where something kind of similar happened. And nope, 22. And it was a kind of a wake up call to be like, okay, we're maybe a little too dependent on these platforms, and that's still something that we're addressing as we go. It's like when you find really good platforms, you want to keep doubling down on them. There are only so many ways in the modern era to reach people, and so what you have to do is you have to be very careful. Always got to make sure you're playing by the rules. The the reasons why we lost our platforms ultimately were very immaterial to the brand itself that we're running. We just were small time. We weren't spending a lot of money on these platforms. We didn't really have connections with uh, account reps or anything like that. And I mean, there were scary periods, definitely very scary periods. We had to work very hard to try to, get back what we had, make connections, work with agencies who have actual like brand reps there at the platforms. And
Hmm.
that was a big, that was a big moment. That was tough. And now, knock on wood, hopefully we've reached the point where we're spending enough on these platforms and we've been doing it for long enough and we know what to do and what not to do that hopefully we future proofed that. But it's definitely a line that you got to pay attention to because you never want to wake up one day and be like, oh, well, the platform that was driving 70% of my revenue, we just lost access to. Because what do you do? Well, you do everything you can to get it back.
Yeah, right. What was sort of the in that moment, right? Like, what the thoughts that go to your head? Like, do you have sort of a plan B for acquisition channels, or it's just get it back at all cost?
Get it back at all costs at that point. I mean,
Right.
we were so early on. I mean, we barely even built up an email list. We didn't have yeah, you lose your community. You lose any way that you can reach
Mm.
people. And so we spent the next few months really doing everything we could to try to get that back up, and largely just sort of treading water in the meantime. It was not a fun experience.
No, I can imagine. Because it is like politically sensitive, right? The companies. So have you found like a line to walk in that sense? Like you can't do this, you can't do that. Like
Yeah,
so.
and it's less about the political side of things and more just about knowing what you can and can't show. Like you can't point a gun at the camera. That obviously makes sense.
Sure.
You can't use language that would make someone believe that they're buying a weapon. That makes sense. And
Mm-hmm.
not that we were doing any of that. It's just that Facebook's machine learning used to be a little bit more sensitive, and especially when we were a newer account, now we have a lot more data that backs up our account, and so we're subjected to a lot fewer issues overall, especially stuff that's just
Mm-hmm.
like a computer-based issue. Again, knock on wood, but that's been our experience the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can imagine you're like totally over talking about this, but sort of the Second Amendment thing. Like, do you see your company being sort of having a voice in that space as like you gotta inform people in the right way about it, or is it sort of a moral responsibility in that sense, or you don't
I
experience it
mean,
that way?
yes, I mean, a big part of our mission is helping responsible individuals find ways to carry safely and
Mm-hmm.
providing solutions for those people. Ultimately, we are not, I would not consider us to be a politically driven organization. That's never been part of what we set out to do. I
Sure.
don't really care where on the political spectrum you are. If you're looking to carry safely and responsibly, then we are happy to equip you. Matter of fact, it's our privilege to get to equip you in that way. So really, the only thing that we hard anchor ourselves to is that we believe that the right to keep and bear arms is a fundamental right for free peoples. We believe that it is a defense against tyranny and ultimately a contributing factor to a polite society. And so that's something that we definitely hang our hat on, and we want to help as many people as possible to exercise their rights safely.
Mm-hmm. For sure. What sort of role does like the regulatory shifts, right? The whole political landscape as it is, especially the last I don't know couple weeks, or whatever, last years. Let's put it that. How big is that? Like in the back of your mind, like sort of demand forecasting in that way.
Yeah, so it's actually very interesting. So I'll speak broadly about the entire kind of tactical industry, of which
Sure.
I would say we are adjacent, but definitely we see similar fits and starts. Um, the more likely a right is to be in danger, the more people want to make purchasing decisions related to that. So when you have primarily Democrats in office who are making big pushes to restrict guns in different ways, that's when you see people making a lot more purchases because there's a sense of urgency. There's also a sense of defiance. It's like, you're not going to tell me what I can and can't buy. That's just the market speaking at large. When you have a Republican controlled House, a Republican controlled Senate, a Republican president, and a Supreme Court that seems to be leaning in favor of giving people more liberties, not fewer, then there's less urgency. People do not feel as concerned about it. People are like, well, I can go out and buy that today, or I could go out and buy that tomorrow, and I could go out and buy
Okay.
that in 3 months. So what's the rush? So that's definitely a consideration. But then obviously the inverse of that is, as more and more states allow constitutional carry, for example, where you don't have to have a specific permit. Just if you are a law-abiding citizen over the age of 21, then you're allowed to carry a weapon. That reduces the barrier to entry of people who say, I'm going to get into concealed carry, because you no longer have to go and pay $200 and take 8 hours out of your Saturday or whatever the requirements were to go get your carry permit. You can just start carrying. Now, the merits of that being a discussion for another time, it does increase the pool of people who are looking to carry concealed. So you constantly have people who especially are aging into it. It's like they're turning 21. They're thinking, hey, I'm going to go carry. The younger population is more likely to be active and more likely to be, wearing relaxed clothing, especially in this world of kind of post-office culture. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of people are never going to have the office with the 9 to 5 on Monday to Friday where they go in wearing, slacks and a button down or whatever. So I've lost track of the question at this point, but the yes, the political environment and the landscape there does make an impact, sort of both positively and negatively.
It's an interesting one. Do you see like other markets where that plays a part? The urgency around regulatory shifts.
Cars. I mean, if you
Right.
look at what's going on right now with the rollback of a lot of regulations, and companies like Ram and like Porsche
Hmm.
reversing course and saying, hey, you know what? We're actually going to keep putting big engines in cars because that's what the market keeps wanting to buy. And different government entities saying, okay, well, maybe our targeting an all electric 2020 or 2030 or 2034 or whatever was premature, which of course it was. Anyone with a brain could have told you that that was premature and was never going to happen and was not even good for the
I was
overall
actually
environment.
convinced it was gonna happen. I'm in Europe, right? So that's they're like a
Well,
little bit more
I spent a lot
strict,
of
but
time in Europe, for family and everything, but even
hmm
so, it's just like you look at the macroeconomic implications of the
yeah.
of fuel, right? And fuel in every capacity. It just the grid was never going to be there. The pollution impact of mining lithium ion batteries and just the current state of how we manufacture electric cars and all that kind of stuff. It was never going to happen. But that is another industry where, depending on the regulatory environment, like you look last year, so obviously here in America, people went out and paid insane amounts of money for what they thought was going to be kind of like the last call for a lot of these big American V8s, with
Hmm.
Dodge shutting down the Charger and the Challenger with the Hellcats and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And now Dodge is like, well, actually, Trump's going to let us keep making these, so we're going to just keep bringing them back. And people keep buying them because it's what the market wants. But that was definitely an area where the fear of not being able to buy something led people to making purchase decisions that they maybe would have otherwise postponed.
for sure. Interesting, for sure, man. Totally other part of the business, but the retailing side of it. How have you sort of approached partnering in that sense and building relationships in that sense?
So we're not huge on the retail side, and when you say retail, I assume you mean working through wholesale distributors
Sure.
or stores or
Right.
whatever. Yeah, um, we've dipped our toe. We've gone to SHOT Show a few times. We've had conversations. We've been in a few stores, a few big boxes, a few smaller mom and pops. The difficulty with retail is with retail you got to sell the product twice. You got to sell it to a store, and
Mm,
then the store's got to sell it to a customer. So there are more mouths to feed, more things that have to go right. And when you're dealing with clothing, especially for kind of a new upstart clothing brand, you have a lot of shelf keeping units that you have to maintain. If I've got a pair of pants, I've got it in 3 colors and 5 sizes, that's 15 different products that somebody might have to stock in order to have the representative line of that. That's before you even get into what's the bell curve distribution of sizing going to be, one small, three medium, five large, 4XL, all of it becomes very difficult to have the representative selection of your products without having a major investment into inventory. And if you're an unproven brand, getting that brand to come in, that retailer to come in and say, hey, yeah, we're going to invest $20,000 in buying, a representative selection of your full catalog. That's a big ask, especially for something that's
mhm.
fairly unproven. So you also, when you add a lot of retailers and wholesalers and stuff, um, you're tying yourself at the hip to them. And then what you can and can't do becomes a lot more restricted because you want to run a flash sale. Well, you better give them the same opportunity and the same heads up to run that flash sale. And if that impacts their margin, you may have to give them a credit back because they had to sell their products at less than they wanted to sell them for.
Mhm.
Or your forecasting and supply chain. It's like you got to make sure you're building in enough production for them, but then if they don't end up selling, you could be stuck having overproduced relative to what you want. So it puts a lot of shackles on a business that also is not, bluntly speaking, valued as highly as you're owning the customer yourself. And so if you are a founder and you're thinking about the eventual retail fair market value of your business, having a really strong, robust direct to customer brand is more valuable than having a big wholesale brand. And so we've just made the decision to focus more on the direct to customer side than the wholesale side.
You see that as a trend, like distribution is evolving in that sense, more D2C, more owning the client or the customer.
I think in a lot of ways, yes. Like if you wind the clock back 20 years to, early internet or pre-internet, there were way fewer ways to shop, right? Like you
Right.
went to stores to shop. Nowadays, I can get in front of you and give you a shopping opportunity while you are, drinking your morning coffee in your living room. And, I can just reach you in that way. So I think that the need for aggregate retailers and especially brick and mortar storefronts is heavily diminished compared to what it used to be. Now, some people still prefer to shop that way. That's fine. If you prefer to shop that way, that's your prerogative. But There are also many people, like my wife, who hate to go to department stores, cannot stand it. She would gladly spend an hour on her laptop with a million tabs open, looking through the different things she wants to order, then go and walk around a department store for an hour. And that's just, I think a lot of people feel that way.
Hmm. Gotcha, man. It's an interesting space for sure. How involved are you in the design at all, or more the executive side of things?
I am the design. So
You are the design?
I do all of the product. Every product we've ever developed has been me.
Cool. What's that like? Sort of the balancing act.
It's fun. It's the most fun part of my job. I mean, everything else
Okay.
that I do just so I can keep designing and developing new
Oh,
products. Like
really?
it's
Oh,
all, I mean, it's all sustainment. Like I do the finance stuff and the compliance stuff and some of the marketing stuff and all of that stuff. But because you have to do it. If you don't do that, you don't have a business. Um, but the product design, being able to come out with new products that then push the envelope and I make stuff that I want to wear. And
mm,
it's like, okay, and this has worked out pretty well for me. Turns out that I'm, a pretty good judge of these things. And
apparently.
yes, apparently. And then being able to roll out new stuff. I mean, that's the exciting part of the job. So
Hmm.
as the business grows and I'm able to hand off more and more of the like day-to-day operational type of stuff, I really focus my role in as founder on strategy, partnerships, and product. And that's what I'm best at. And everything else I can hire or outsource or whatever that looks like. And it took a while to get to that point, but that's really the direction that we're going in because I know that the more products we launch, the more qualified shots on goal we have at a viral product or a product that really, really takes off and just resonates with people. And the more of those you have, the more you have repeat buyers, loyal customers, and it
Yeah,
snowballs.
yeah. No, it does for sure. What's sort of the biggest like hidden cost or like something unexpected about the design process as far as R&D costs go that like an outsider wouldn't think of in the tactical space?
It always takes longer than you think. It always takes more iterations than you think. And your first production version, no matter how much you try, is always going to have problems. And if you just kind of account for that, and then it's like, all right, yeah, I'll give you a story from early on. We our first product was our carrier joggers, and we released them. We released them in small to XL to start with, and then pretty quickly we got a lot of feedback. Hey, we want these for bigger boy sizes, so we released 2XL and 3XL. Pretty quickly, what we realized is that when you scaled the product up to 2XL and 3XL, there was one seam in the back below the waistband and above the pockets that just wasn't quite built for that size. And we were having these failures where people they'd be like wearing the pants, and then all of a sudden they'd have this massive hole open up in the pants in the back. And I was like, well, we couldn't have, I'm a size medium, so I was never trying on 3XL stuff. It's like, all right, unfortunately, we learned that from customers. We replaced every product that had that issue, and we reinforced those seams for the second batch. And,
Hmm.
it's like we've got products that we're going to release uh, here, in September and October that I've been working on since January. And it's like because you get the idea, you bring it forward, you go through material selection, you make your first sample, things are not quite right. You make your second sample, things are not quite right. You make your third sample. I'd say it usually takes about 3 iterations of samples before I have something that I'm ready to produce. And then after we produce it, we always start relatively small, sell them, get feedback, incorporate feedback, usually quietly. It's like we're not going to release like this is a new and improved version of the product or anything. It's more just like, okay, those zippers weren't as strong as they needed to be. Those pockets weren't as big as they should have been. We need to, adjust the ankle cuffs a little bit just based on real world feedback. And
Hmm.
you kind of get that at scale. And obviously if there are problems that impact the functionality of the product, you just got to be ready to warranty those and send the customer a new one because if they are kind of your first at bat and there are problems, you got to make it right by them.
For sure, for sure. What's the moonshot plan with Arrowhead? Like you're 5 years deep right now. What's the next 2, 3, 4, whatever decades?
Yeah, so I mean, we as a team are pretty well aligned about our strategy growth plan. We really want to keep growing this thing and grow it fairly aggressively while maintaining overall strong financials. To do so, we need to continue to expand our team, expand our product line, and invest in more and better marketing content because content is the number one thing that determines the success of your marketing. So really, that's kind of the roadmap. And it's a pretty simple formula because once you establish that product market fit, and then you take care of all of your foundational stuff in terms of compliance and the other things that if not taken care of will tank your business. Then you figure out, okay, what is what is the thing that you're good at and what do you need to keep doing? And for us, we keep making more new, different kinds of products, and keep backing them up with really great content and good partnerships and stuff like that. So, 5 years from now, I don't know, but certainly, we've got about a 3-year, very, specific growth plan that we've laid out. And, that's basically going into effect now, the early stages of it.
Thanks for listening to the Quinn Podcast. If you enjoyed it, you can go to quinnpodcast.com to check out all of the previous episodes. quinnpodcast.com.